Here in session one, we're going to talk about God's omniscience. And what that means is that God knows everything. But that's really a tough one to embrace, because if God really knows everything, then why does He allow pain, tragedy, crisis in your life and mine? Why didn't He just stop it all? Well, we're going to look at those hard questions. We're going to come back and talk about that whole attribute of omniscience. And then hopefully we're going to bring it home so that you can grab a hold of it, embrace it, and it can become a part of your very life. See, I think for some of us in our Christian life, we ask that question. Now, most of us don't want to admit it. Most of us just don't want to, to be that bold. The song they just sang, we don't want to say, hey, God, I was there. I waited for you. Where were you? Okay? Some of you have prayed and you just felt like your prayers didn't go above the ceiling. Some of you have asked some of those hard questions. Now, here's what we want to talk about. The reality is that the questions are there. The reality is that just exactly what was said in one of the videos, we don't always get it. Understand something, there's a major disconnect, there's a major issue that we've got to get past, and here it is. You ready? God is infinite, and we are finite. God is just, He's got the big picture, and we see such a small part of that. And so we question. God, where were you? Where was God, when? Well, maybe you've asked this question. God, why would you let something like that happen? Now, let me tell you. Tonight, we're going to talk about some of those hard questions. I'm going to throw some of them out. Some of them you've thought of, some of them you've actually said. Maybe you've got some that I've never even heard. But I want to tell you this. I can't answer that question in the sense that I can put it all together and say, okay, here's A, here's B, here's C, and then everything's just going to work out okay. I can tell you that through going through some trials and tragedy in my own personal life, that I had to come back to the point of realizing that the only answer that we have to some of the difficult questions of life, are you ready for this? And this is going to sound like a cliche. The only answer is God. Now, as Rick and I talked about putting all this together, and we thought about it in light of young people, and hopefully it'll be a help to adults as well, but as we thought about it in light of you as students, here's what we want to let you know. There's no way to explain some of the things that we talk about because our minds are so finite. So in order to deal with this, here's what we have to do. We have to go back to something called the attributes of God. Now, the attributes, or if you would, maybe a term you're more familiar with, the characteristics of God. And the one we want to deal with tonight is this one. Okay, you ready? Here it is. His omniscience. Now, some of you are familiar with that term. You've studied it before. And some of you, it's brand new. The bottom line, I put the little phrase here, God knows everything. Now, let's just complicate it just a little bit. If God knows everything, you got to be asking some questions like, God, why did you let this happen? If you know everything, okay, then, you ready for this? Then why do I feel so alone? They just got through singing, "We're Never Alone." Probably while they were singing, some of you are going, yeah, okay, that's a really nice song. But they don't understand how lonely I am. God, if you're really in charge, if you really know everything, then let me ask you a question. Then why do I question even if you exist? If you're even real? God, if you know everything, then why in the world did you let my friend commit suicide? If you know everything, then listen, God, I got a question for you. Why did you let me get abused? You go, man, you're like just knocking all the scabs off. Hey, God, if you're really in control and you really know everything, then let me ask you a question. Then why is it that I think as a Christian, why do I believe it, and I really do believe it, that I can continue living this secret life of sin and get away with it? God, if you really know everything, then let me ask you this. Then why don't you just fix everything, and why don't you just fix everybody? I mean, probably some of you are something like this. If I was God, that's what I'd do. Questions. We wanted to talk to you about some real issues. Actually, let me mention this. You're not the first ones to ask these questions. There are people right in this room, some of your leaders, some of your counselors. I can tell you this, your speaker, who have asked the same questions. But it even goes all the way back. If you were to look into Scripture and you were to go back to the book of Job, you know what Job had 3 really pertinent questions. Here's what his questions were. You ready for this? His first question was this: why was I ever born? He followed that one up. His second question was, having been born, why didn't you just let me die at birth? And then his third question was this, okay, then why can't I die now? You go, man, that's like right there in your face. That's right there where some of you live. Because there are people in this room tonight that go, I don't even know why in the world God ever let me be born. There are others of you that are sitting here this evening, you're going, you've thought about the whole idea. If I'm born, nothing to do about that now. Boy, why can't I just die? See, it's not original. I want you to watch something here. Actually, I recorded it because we're going to be telling some real life stories here. We're not making these up. And we're telling some real life stories. We recorded this so that you could see it. And I just want you to see, this is my real life story.
March 14th, 2002 started out like most of my other days. I got up early, went to the airport, caught a flight. But this day I was flying into Atlanta and then going on up to Chattanooga. I had meetings all weekend, but I was going to begin my week by spending some time with my daughter. We were going to a Christian concert. We were going to go to her church, and then I was going to go on to my meetings. Little did I know that before I even caught the plane, my daughter would already be dead, and she'd be in eternity. See, she was in a 125-car pileup, and she was one of the only 5 out of the entire accident that were killed. I journaled through the entire nightmare because I just really didn't know how to express my thoughts. So I wrote them down. One of the mornings right after she died, I wrote this. I woke up at 3:55 this morning, and my first thought was about 1 week ago, I buried my baby. She was 24, but she was still my baby. It seems like it was just yesterday, but yet it seems like an eternity. It seems like it's just right now. I sit here looking at her picture, and I still cannot believe that she really is gone, but I know that she is. God, I just don't understand.
See, there are some questions that all of our little cliches just don't answer. And a week from the day that we put my daughter in the ground, I went for a long walk, and I was still just trying to process all of it. Now understand something. This coming March, it will be 7 years. And I want to tell you this. I love God. I love the Bible. I read it every day, but I'm still processing it. See, there are some questions that don't just have easy answers. Now, I still believe the answer is God, but that doesn't mean that I can just simply say, oh, everything's okay. We have to really deal with where we live. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Let's move into that. Hey, what is really the truth about God? Okay? I mean, if we're going to look at this, the answer is God. So what is the truth about God? Well, what does it mean to say that He's omniscient? I want to just give you some ideas of that, because when we talk about God knows everything, I mean, again, that just sounds like one of those Bible things that you just say and everybody moves on. But what does that mean? Okay, if you wanted, some of you are taking notes, you can write down. Obviously, we said God knows everything, but here's what it is. He possesses perfect knowledge. He's got perfect knowledge. He has no need to learn. God doesn't need to learn anything. Understand something. God never has learned, and He never will learn. If He can learn, He's not God. You and I are constantly learning, at least I hope we are. But God has never learned anything. God perfectly knows Himself. I want you to know, at my age, I am still discovering me. And some of the things I discover about me, I don't like. But God never discovers himself. He knows himself perfectly. Here's one. God knows instantly and effortlessly all matters all at the same time. He knows everything. He knows all matters and all matter. He just knows it. You're not even sure what's next in this meeting. You don't even know what's next all night. God knows all of that. Then from the beginning. God knows the future. And you ready for this? He knows all the variables that are going to happen. Not only that, he knows all the variables that could have happened. Let me just help you with that one. Wonder if on March 14, 2002, my daughter had not been late to work because her dog had run away. Wonder if she had been on time like she always was. Wonder if she had been early like she always was, then she would have been ahead of the accident and she would still be alive. Now let me just tell you, more than one time I've thought about that. Or let's just say this, wonder if they had stopped to just get a cup of coffee. You ready for this one? I was flying down to be with her. I told you I was getting on the airplane that morning, and then I was flying down, and I was to be there that evening. We were going to go to a Christian concert, then we were going to go to her church the next night. Let me ask you this one, okay? Because here's where I lived for a long time. Wonder if I had gone the day before. So that I was there, and I was able to say to her, why don't you take the day off? Or I had said to her, tell you what, I'll go find the dumb dog. See, we can chase all those things around all we want to. But here's the thing we have to understand. God knows. You want an interesting verse? Write this one down. Isaiah 57, verses 1 and 2. You know what Isaiah 57, 1 and 2 says? One of the verses that gave me great comfort, because here's what it says. It talks about this. It says that sometimes that God takes young people to spare them from the pain, the agony, and the tragedy that's to come. I don't know. All I know is that he knows all that. God knows the future. God never discovers anything. You ready for this one? He's never surprised. He's never amazed. He never wonders at anything. I like this one. This is not very theological in the sense that you probably won't find it in any theology books. But see, one of the things I do is every morning I take one of the attributes of God. This was something that's been good for me, and I meditate on it. And so I've written some of these things I have given you. I've just written them down. This is one of the things I wrote. Again, you won't find this in any systematic theology books. You ready? Here it is. God never says oops or oh no. Now, for all of you who just said, wow, he's not very deep, you're right, okay? But I understand. You got that one, right? I'm constantly going, oh, no. Or, oops, I wish I hadn't have done that. I say that way too many times. God never says that. You know why? Because he knows everything. God knows us completely. That's scary. God knows everything about us. And he knows all about us from beginning to end. You say, well, what difference does that make? Well, we're going to get to that in just a minute. See, here's the point. The more we understand God, the more we can not only understand what happens to us, deal with what happens to us, and just like Jeremy Camp said, we can walk by faith, even when we can't see. Because now we realize that we serve an awesome God. What is omniscience? Now, what does the Bible say? Let's talk about that for a minute. What does the Bible say about God and his omniscience? I'm going to show you some references, and I'm going to just kind of highlight the verses for you. You can jot them down if you'd like to. These are just some great verses that deal with that. Isaiah chapter 40 and verses 13 and 14 says this, who has directed the Spirit of the Lord? Okay, the answer obviously is this is kind of one of those questions that already has the answer. Nobody. Okay? Or who is his counselor? Who taught God? Where did God go to school? We were just at a dinner this evening, my wife and I, and we were seeing this young girl sitting across the table and she had on her high school ring. God doesn't have any class rings. He didn't need them. Who taught God? Nobody taught God. You jump down to the very end of that passage, it says, who taught him knowledge? Nobody. Who showed him understanding? Nobody. God knows everything. Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 and 10 says this, he remembers the former things of old, for I am God, there is none other. I am God, and there is none like me. Now, that's a pretty strong statement to make. But when you can go on and then say, I declare the end from the beginning, and the ancient things are not that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. See, God says, I know the end from the beginning. I know everything that's going to happen. I've already predicted it. I've already prophesied it, and nobody can change it. And so when I make a statement like I'm God and nobody can do anything about that, guess what? I can make that. I could stand up here tonight and say, I'm going to be in control of everything tonight. I can't even control, some of the people that work with me. All right, so I can't do that. What about this passage? Psalm 139. This is a great one. If you don't know this one, Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6 says, O Lord, you have searched me and you have known me. Remember what I said? He knows us completely. You know my downsetting, you know my rising up, you understand my thought afar off. You know what that means? You got it ready? He knows when we sit down, he knows when we get up, he knows what we're thinking. That ought to scare us a little bit. He said, I know everything about you. You're acquainted with all my ways. This is what the psalmist David said. I'll not read all of it. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 8. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him. God knows everything. God knows what you need. Now again, let's go back to the hard questions. You go, okay, if God knows what you need, then why did he let your daughter get killed? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know God. And I know because he knows all things, he doesn't make mistakes. And you go, well, you're just saying that. Well, let me just tell you, I've wrestled with that for a long time. Here's another one. Acts chapter 15 and verse 8 says, so God, who knows the heart, acknowledged them by giving them the Holy Spirit. He knows our hearts. Psalm 147 verse 4, he counts the number of the stars and he calls them by name. We're still discovering. Every time we think we've figured out the whole universe, we realize there's more. God knows all the stars. He called them by name. Here's another one. Jeremiah chapter 38, verses 17 to 20. I'll not read all of it, but basically Jeremiah is talking to Zedekiah, and he's telling him all these things, and he's saying, don't do this and so on. And then he says this, please obey the voice of the Lord which I speak to you. So it shall be well with you, and your soul shall live. Here's what difference that makes to you and me. If God knows everything, when God speaks to us through his word, we ought to listen. He says, please obey, because if you listen, it's going to work out for you. And some of us can give testimony to the fact that when we don't listen, it doesn't work out. Colossians 1, 16 to 17, for by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things are created by him, through him, and for him. And he before all things, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. Here's the capitalization of that. He created it, and he holds it all together. Literally, understand, when it says by him all things consist, see, one of these days we're afraid there's going to be a nuclear holocaust or there's going to be this or that or the other. That's not how the world's going to end. What's going to happen is one of these days when God says, okay, that's it, we're done. You know what he's going to do? The God who holds the universe in his hand is just simply going to turn loose. That God knows all things. One of the verses I didn't put in here, but I've added, Hebrews 4:13 says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before his eyes of him to whom we must give account. So let me ask you this question. How does this apply to me? How does it apply to me? What difference does it make if God is really omniscient, I got hard questions in my life, and some of you are dealing with some hard issues. I'm not trying to say, look, you're going through some hard things, you got some bad things happening to you. I'm not trying to say, just go, oh, it's okay, no big deal. It's a big deal. But the only place you're going to find comfort and the only place you're going to find answers is in God. So what does it mean to us? How do we apply it? I'm going to give you 4 words. Here it is. Number 1, it means security. That means, here's the security we have. You ready? Because God knows everything and because He knows us completely, that means that nothing can ever come to light. God will never discover anything about you or me that will turn Him against us. You ever had a friend that when they found out something about you, they went, okay, that's it, we're done? Not God. There is nothing that will turn Him against us. One of my favorite writers, W.W.G.W. Tozier, said this. He talks about no talebearer can inform on us, no enemy can make an accusation stick, and he goes on to say that no skeleton can come tumbling out of our closet. Basically, here's what he says. There is nothing that God would ever discover about us, and you know why? Because He knew us in advance. Remember the verse, the things I talked about last night, how Jesus died for us, paid the price. It says that He loved us even that while we were yet sinners. He knew everything that I was going to do. He knew all the terrible things. He knew as a believer that I was going to flop sometimes. And in light of all that, He still cared for me. It means security, but it also means comfort. See, when we're faced with some unexplainable circumstances in our life, we can take refuge there. We can find comfort. There are times when there's no human that can help you. There are sometimes they can put their arm around you, they can love on you, they can pray for you, they can do everything humanly possible, but there are just sometimes where there is a pain inside of you that is so great that there is no way that somebody on the outside can do anything to help you on the inside. Some of you know what I mean. See, many times, my wife and I have journaled over the last 7 years, and in